It's time for Cutting Edge Consciousness with Freeman Michaels and Barnet Bain. Thought-provoking discussions and bold ideas from the edge of possibility.
And welcome to Cutting Edge Consciousness. Freeman Michaels here.
With Barnet Bain.
We've got a guest.
Good moment. We have a guest.
Oh my gosh.
Good moment. Good moment, everyone.
Oh, what people don't know is sometimes the mad scramble behind the scenes.
Who, us? Aren't we cool and calm and collected?
It always seems so cool. You especially seem awfully cool.
I'm very, you know what, I'm basking in the reflective coolness of Spence, who's the only one that knows
Cool.
what goes on here. How are you, Spence? Spence is good, as always. So, yeah, I'm going to be as cool as I can be, but we made it.
Yeah.
The whole country's lost its cool.
That's a fact. The calm and composure is off completely.
I mean, it's just wildness. So I'm driving in, and I hear, just for starters, I hear, well, Congress is facing ongoing Middle East Syria drama. They are facing funding problem, another fiscal cliff. They're going to shut down the government probably before we finish the show. They're facing an immigration law decision. They have Obamacare issues. So there's just this systemic meltdown. And I heard so much horse trading going on, and so much anxiety and so much fear. And I realized that this is, I'm passing Marie Callender's, who not a sponsor of ours yet, but should be. And I see they're selling big, pies, and they're saying they're running out of pies, big pie sale. This is what happens when you're fighting for one piece of pie.
Yeah,
when you got the pie consciousness, and
that's nice.
And it's a zero-sum game. You can only slice one pie so many times, and this, I think, is the fundamental paradigm shift that we have an opportunity to embrace and to begin to explore. Is zero-sum thinking, is pie thinking really the highest experience that we can have with the world, with the universe? No,
It's not.
Okay.
But it is something that we track back to because, look, we've been taught it. And, even if we don't like to admit it, it's like a default setting. It's what we organize a lot of our decision making around when we're unconscious. So the response is, there's a couple responses. And we've said many times, how do I own this? Like, what's showing up for me so that I can own it in an empowered way and then respond to it? And
so you're saying, how is it that I am the imposer of the pie boundaries here?
Or I'm in the
boy, that metaphor is really stretching, isn't it?
Or I'm the interpreter. I mean, because you can go as far as I'm creating, which is fine, but you can just go, I'm the interpreter. So what interpretations are possible? And
you're either creating it directly, or you're allowing it by the defaulting to a socialized perspective of pie-ness.
That's it.
We grow up in this pie world, and we either create or make decisions based on our own reactivity to, if I don't, my kids have to have, I've got to protect a limited rice bowl for my kids, so your kids can't eat. This sort of awareness, we either allow others to define the world, or we make decisions ourselves that define the world for ourselves and for others.
Yeah.
But to reframe that?
To allow it as a thread of possibility. It's a valid thread of possibility. We can run down that road, or we can foster another possibility, another relationship, another way of relating to whatever's showing up. And it's ultimately a relationship with ourselves. For me, I need daily reminders.
If only we had some fabulous resource that we could turn to on a daily basis.
That's what I'm saying.
For a little bit of
What do you got for us, Barnet?
I don't know.
Yes, you do. You don't know, we're in big trouble.
Well, we have a really great guest today. We have Scott Blum, who is, along with his wife, Madison, the founder of the Daily
Love that.
And he's also a terrific friend and a friend of the show,
Yeah.
and a gifted novelist and musician and film director now as well. He has a new movie that we'll talk about a little bit. We have a lot to talk about.
Welcome to the show, Scott.
Thank you so much for having me.
Barnett's a mid-meditation.
I'm blissed.
Got to come him out of his blissful state.
Scott, how are you?
Good. I'm hoping I'm not interrupting your meditation there.
Yeah, please.
Well, you know
Interrupt.
what? I get reminded if I don't have my daily I don't even remember half the time to get into it. So thank you for thank you for joining us and for all that you are contributing.
So the conversation which we started, which we'd love to invite you into, is about an orientation towards something that, while albeit well rehearsed and well patterned in terms of the synapses in our brain and our conditioned responses and the sort of reactive patterning and behavior, it isn't necessarily helpful. And I think the three of us could probably agree on that pretty quickly. And by the way, Scott, if you don't, you can always say, Freeman, you're wrong. But the grounding, where we choose to place our attention, what we choose to source, to reorient and begin to build this other capacity of a different possibility. That's what I want to talk about.
I like that. Reorient. Sounds like cramps.
It feels like cramps sometimes.
It sure does.
It does. It really does. 'Cause this is not an easy path. But you've created a resource for folks that presents another possibility. I want to talk about that.
Well, so my wife, Madison Taylor, and I started Daily Ohm almost 10 years ago, actually, 2004, primarily because we were in the midst of, the craziness of Los Angeles, and I was in a music business career and dealing with traffic and all of those types of things. And we were spending all of our time doing yoga and meditating just to kind of our spare time, just to deal with the craziness of what is it like being, in a successful career in Los Angeles. And so what we did is we decided, actually my wife started an aromatherapy company, and within minutes of me quitting my music industry job and working with her, it was on the same trajectory, and it was going crazy, and the same things were happening as they were, when I was working for somebody else. And so we just had a hard discussion and say, well, why are we working so hard in order to support, this small amount of time that we invest every day in ourselves? Why can't we integrate that, with all 24 hours of our day, trying to integrate our belief in, spirituality, living a conscious life, and all of those things with our career? And so the reason we started Daily Ohm to start with was purely selfish reasons. We just wanted, to live this way, and thought that, hey, maybe we can get other people to pay us to live this way. And so that was kind of the goal. And then, of course, the way that the universe works is, all of a sudden, within weeks, we were in service to the universe as opposed to the other way around. But it was a nice fantasy for a few days that that it was going to be all easy. But that being said, it is the way of, coming back to your discussion. I think that the main thing that a lot of us get tripped up on is letting our brains kind of lead these decisions when it comes to what we should do, what meaningful things should we do with our lives. And although the brain is a great tool, it really traps us in a lot of these types of corners that you've been talking about, as opposed to really, I think, what we're really talking about was coming back to ourselves and really relying on our intuition in order to guide ourselves, especially in these really key decisions like what should we do with our lives, that sort of thing, and how should we deal with others.
And as an empowered response to the turbulence, to the craziness that we're seeing reflected in this thing we're going to call the collective.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, there's the chaos that happens that is either a beautiful, fertile chaos for something wonderful, or can be a terrifying, terrifying chaos to the degree that we resist it and control it. It doubles up, it builds a charge, it builds a charge, it builds a charge. And we tend to kind of double down, at least as a culture, and we double down on controlling through strategy and through trying to outthink life, as though we could outthink life. And that tracks back to the pie. We're operating in the pie. We're operating in our model of the past, and we double down on it. And what you're talking about, Scott, is bringing into a parallel, a collaborative, a constructive.
I have a coherence would be a word.
Coherent relationship with our doing abilities and our thinking abilities to bring in an intuitive relationship with things that immediately begins to break down the zero-sum game. It really suddenly begins to erode the hard lines, or the hard edges of what will happen and what won't happen.
And more pies begin to appear.
Yeah, the prognostications that we do that are really just, we look back into our past, and we're driven mostly by the things that were frightening and that didn't work in the past, and we throw them out into the future because we create what we desire the most or what we fear the most, and we have a better we've habituated the ability to imagine the fear stories. That just is an easier thing to imagine, and so we go round and round and round and round in pie world. But you're modeling something very, very unique and very beautiful in the world, because you and Madison both are living exemplars of what happens when you bring this intuitive, this heartfelt sensing of what could be possible, and you act upon it. So you're so far off trail. No wonder we couldn't get you easily on the phone this morning.
Our secret's out of the bag. That's why we became a little stressed.
Well, I mean, you are really, they say, there's the cliche about walking your talk. You're just being a real model in a lot of ways.
And what I heard you saying, Scott, which I like, is the congruence between your life and making a living, right? There was this sense like, okay, how do we respond to this kind of rat race? That's my language, but it's a common vernacular for the kind of franticness, especially in Hollywood, where there is this pie syndrome. There's only so much. That's a big Hollywood myth. What's an empowered response, and how do we make our lives our living? That's exciting to me.
Yeah, well, absolutely. I mean, it's the whole idea of having things limited or using, the vocabulary of lack and pie-ness and all of those types of things. Truly, what that does is it forces you to stay in a particular place of being, which isn't productive at all, and it's so far removed from the real reason that we're all here, which is to make the world a better place and to support each other. And that's not really the point of this is mine. There's only so much, and therefore I'm going to get as much of this pie as possible. It's just so irrelevant and so far removed from the whole reason why we're interconnected, and are acknowledging that we're interconnected and we're all here for the same reason. So until you start getting really in touch with that, then you're just in some ways postponing your whole reason for being here, really.
It feels to me like we're, and I'll just speak personally, like growing into the consciousness that we're talking about, which, by the way, we'll have to talk about after we come back from our break, because our producer just waved at me to go to break.
He said, you guys are like totally unconscious about the business we have to do here.
We're going to do a little business, sell some pies, and we'll be right back after these messages. Stay with us here on Cutting Edge Consciousness.
Welcome back to Cutting Edge Consciousness, thought-provoking discussions and bold ideas from the edge of possibility.
Well, thank you for staying with us. We know it was a long break, and I hope that you bought pies or whatever we were selling. But we're back with Scott Blum. We were talking about a very different way of holding consciousness. So much of myself, you, Freeman, we've talked about this a lot. Our community, our audience, we're so kind of inside our own parentheses here. It's cutting edge consciousness, but we don't often pause to look a little more closely at what we're referring to. And often we're referring to, well, how can we become more and more empowered inside us, inside a certain structure that we don't essentially question. And on this show with Scott, we are essentially revisiting the what we are holding as consciousness, and it is not a zero-sum game. Consciousness is so consciousness is firing on so many cylinders that if we want to hold it as a zero-sum game, it obliges. If we want to play small, it obliges. But if we assume that there is life beyond the boundaries of what we can imagine and life beyond the way we control things, that imagination proceeds from there, then that is not a zero-sum thing at all.
Not at all.
And what are the tools and what are the practices that we can begin to explore and live into that bring on, that fire up those capacities? And Scott, you've been alluding to a life lived in tune with intuition. And anybody that looks at your life would certainly have to agree that you're either the luckiest person on the planet, and we know that that's not the case, and so that you are following some guidance and have simply living in a juicier imagination.
So tell us about that.
Well, yeah, I think at this point in my life, I really don't wake up with too many preconceived notions of what's going to happen through the day. I do try to stay in the moment. I've spent, as I was saying before, spending a lot of my spare time trying to meditate, and about 7 or 8 years ago, I finally decided, you know what, I'm going to stop meditating, because that's not really helpful to me to only have maybe half an hour, 45 minutes, or an hour a day where I'm in tune with the world. I need to do this 24 hours a day, and I need to stop putting meditation as something separate from my day.
That.
But every moment has to be a walking meditation, and I need to make sure that I'm as present as possible to whatever life presents me, whether it's finding a parking space, or not finding a parking space and walking past a homeless person that I wouldn't normally have seen, or taking giving really talented radio hosts the wrong phone number, so there's a little bit of anxiety.
well played.
Okay, you're coming back.
A little bit more of an edge.
Well, I love what you're saying, because you're talking about a kind of spontaneity and maybe even curiosity. In other words, what Barnett was saying about, really trying to control an effort versus an orientation that isn't segmented. Right. What I think I heard is that you were saying, look, I was meditating in a almost compartmentalized way. Like, oh yeah, here's me, the meditator. Right. And then maybe a split, if you will, with that kind of language, when I'm, let's say, dealing with my lawyer or my accountant or something that might bring about some stress.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly.
I don't want to do that. I want to integrate this so there's only one of me here.
Yes, exactly, absolutely, and I think when you do that, of course, it depends on the one of you that we're talking about. But assuming that we're consciousness, that we're trying to embody consciousness, that's when that if you can integrate that person with every moment of your day, then the pies just become irrelevant. You can have pies all day long if you want. Or, maybe you're into crust. Who knows? Whatever you're into is totally fine.
Yeah. That's beautiful.
That is beautiful.
But that's not really, that you don't really need to strive for anything when all you're trying to do is make the most of that moment, which may or may not include pies. That's okay.
Well, I was listening to a little video that somebody had sent me from Alan Watts, and he's talking about working with young people, years in the 60s. Talking about young people would come to him and they don't know what they would do in their lives. And he said, well, if money were not an issue, you're so socialized by the pursuit of money and using money as safety and security and status and identity, and it's all, it's all bound up in, so much of socialization is bound up in that. If money was not an issue, then how would you like to spend your life? And for many, that was already a confusion because
they were so organized.
So organized that
pie,
you can't even sense that there could be a life without the crust, without an edge on it.
Right.
And then for some, it invited a very different kind of exploration. But this is very much to the point, whether you organize around, in that case, money, or you organize it around any kind of fear or structure,
I think even of success and failure. I mean, one of the big fears is the failure. Well, what if you couldn't fail? And from the perspective you're talking about, Scott, there is no failure. Like if you show up, you give the wrong telephone number.
Right.
Well, that's an interesting wrinkle, but we're not going to jump ahead and call it failure. We're going to go, okay, interesting. There's a curiosity. There's a wonder. There's a kind of response system that doesn't make anything wrong or right.
Right. Absolutely.
It makes a larger. It is fodder grist for a larger life.
Yeah.
And energy follows attention. When we put our attention on the Alan Watts model, or we put it on wherever we put it on, it creates a structure. So one of the things that is interesting about this conversation and about you, Scott, is that your attention is on the openness and the adventure and the exploration, and so
and the sharing
in your life reflects it
big time.
So to my point, you have been a musician and an executive. You have this blog. You decided to write fiction, and then very recently you decided to direct a movie. Yes. Now, for many, that might seem like
it's nonlinear.
Well, it is nonlinear, but if you're in a linear world, or if you're in structure, it's very linear, and that seems like an incredibly difficult and arduous leap to make.
Yeah.
But you made it really elegantly, and because your dreams are not bound to the same degree as maybe somebody else's. Now we have so many different levels of consciousness evolving simultaneously on the planet that I have to remind myself to be in wonder and not in judgment and not in self and not measuring. That's trailing back to another pie thing, but to create a movie and direct a movie and write a movie based on your own book, in this case, Walk In, the movie based on your novel Summer's Path. That is a very big, there's a lot of chewing, big biting, and a lot of chewing, and that's a big thing to swallow.
So how did you flit in and out of whatever decision making that led you to do this? How did you get to that? Because again, it can't be linear. It can't be, well, when I was a little kid, you could probably do that. You could probably track a story, but there's something I think more organic. Tell us what happened.
Well, so I didn't. I think it probably all started. At least the storytelling part of it, when I began writing novels. Madison was always the content creator of the family. She wrote, takes care of writing all the daily ohms and all the content that goes on the website. And I was put into the technology and business box, and that was kind of what my role in the relationship. And we still have that relationship as well. But once we started kind of living, living the life that we've been talking about, walking the walk, all of those things we were talking about before, these stories started to come through me. And, my first novel just sort of appeared one day in my brain, and I did everything I could possibly do to subvert it, make it go away, ignore it, and it just wouldn't leave me alone, to the point that it was almost physically painful to remain inside of my body.
Hmm.
And so I actually started writing my first novel just simply to get it out of me so I could move on and get back to work. I mean, that's really what was going on. And this is when I had, been purportedly living an intuitive life for years to that point. But
Well, that's the part that I want to drill down on. So
Yeah.
here you are aware that you're living an intuitive life,
Yep.
and yet you're taking a step into a zone of uncomfortable. I mean, only because it's unfamiliar, and so you become an explorer.
Right.
And you're writing novels, and then you decide, well, I'm going to direct a movie. Now, how that plays out is one thing, but what I'm really interested in you speaking to is what happens to somebody, what happens to you when you're suddenly expanding in a new direction that is like a virgin direction. There are the resistances that come up, and yet you are able to move into them and become close and intimate with an entirely new area of life, and that might be a little bit intimidating to others.
Well, yeah, I think it is. In some ways, I think for me, what I try to do is come back to the to my center and to realize that it's not really me that's happening. I happen to be doing a role,
Mm-hmm.
Especially when it comes to to creative type effort, because really what you're doing is you're just trying to be in tune with the universe and in some ways be a mouthpiece for what needs to be spoken through you.
Mm-hmm.
I mean that's really all you're trying to do. And so when it's not really me, your ego doesn't have to kind of get involved, and the fear doesn't have to get involved, because hey, all I'm going to do is show up and be in the moment. And when people come to me, out of the blue and say, we would like to make a movie based on your books, and you let your left brain kick in and say, okay, well, this makes sense. I could reach a wider audience and blah blah blah. But then my emotions come in, and whether it's my own fear, my own emotions, or spirit giving me guidance, and I say, you know what, I don't trust anybody outside of me to tell a story based on these characters that I've been living with for the last several years.
Mm-hmm.
And so, coming out and although it's the stupidest thing in the world that I could have done, by saying, sorry, I appreciate the opportunity, but I'm not going to let anybody else direct a movie based on my books. Although that was the stupidest thing in the world to say, what was even more remarkable is when the producer came back to me and said, well, then why don't you direct?
Mm-hmm.
Wow. So there's a couple things that hit my brain. First of all, I love some of the language that it just appeared to me out of the blue, and there's an element for me of, we could use the word trust, that I'm trusting something, kind of, it's the big ask. Well, what wants to be revealed here? Or what, there's an openness. And then to be able to follow that, because I don't know, for me, while I have made this a practice in my life, there's still this huge wave right behind these kinds of choices that kind of slaps me sometimes and goes, what are you doing, man? Which I can hear in what you're saying, but enough of you is orienting or utilizing, maybe is the right word, some of these capacities for a whole different way of conceiving and perceiving of your world. That's exciting to me.
Well, I think that the thing that a lot of people feel is that that wave of that wave of fear that's behind you, that's kind of pushing you into a different direction, or in your own mind keeping you on the same path that you should be on, right? But in actuality, this fear is actually pushing you off of the path of your personal destiny. Really,
That's it.
I mean, that's what's happening. And so as soon as you go off the path of your personal destiny, whether you think that logically you're on the right path or not, you have to use every ounce of strength and energy that you can possibly muster in order to stay on that path, because you no longer have the support of the universe behind you.
Oh.
And so if you just go with the path that is your personal destiny, and you're being guided with that, with your intuition, and you listen to everything around you, and you just kind of calibrate yourself to where you're supposed to be going, you have the support of the entire universe behind you, and so it's actually much easier to do that. So it's not harder, it's actually easier. And so I'm just kind of lazy, that's all.
I love that perspective. Well, listen, this has been awesome. The whole idea of following something that's drawing you or drawing out in you, something that may be organically already there or wanting to be revealed.
Forgive me for just jumping, for throwing myself in here, Freeman, but Spence has just held up a clock that out of nowhere went from a whole bunch of time to 23 seconds. So
that's what happens in radio.
So this is what happens here. So, but Scott, your movie.
Yes.
Your movie, Walk-In, is, and I've read the book, folks, and I actually have an advanced copy of the movie, too, but I'm not saying anything. But if you want to hear more, call me. The book is wonderful. The movie is wonderful, and it is going to be, what is the street date through Hay House?
October 15th, it'll be out on DVD and digital.
Fantastic. So, folks, you're going to visit, I'm assuming it's hayhouse.com.
You can go directly to the movie at walkinthemovie.com.
Fantastic.
Walkinthemovie.com or
scottblum.net.
scottblum.net or Daily Ohm, I'm sure, is going to have something, or Cutting Edge Consciousness. We will have something up as well.
Great.
Fantastic.
Scott, thanks so much for hanging out with us.
We're so glad. Say hi to Madison. Lots of love. We'll see you very soon back here on Cutting Edge Consciousness.
Thank you so much. Bye.
And those of you listening, stay tuned, because we'll be right back to wrap up in just a few minutes.
Welcome back to Cutting Edge Consciousness, thought-provoking discussions and bold ideas from the edge of possibility.
And welcome back to Cutting Edge Consciousness. Freeman Michaels here with Barnet and Freeman.
Indeed.
What if I just followed something that is beckoning me to do things very spontaneously? I mean, I think to some degree we do this, but I'm always second guessing it. I don't know. It's a really powerful way to orient. I'm waiting for something to appear that inspires me, or that lights me up, and then I'm going to follow that. I love it, and yet it terrifies me.
Mm-hmm. Well, I don't have anything to add to that.
That's not good in radio, Barnett. Okay, great.
But
no!
I really don't have anything to add to that at this point. At this point, it is an issue of trust.
Big time.
For me. And it is also, I can recognize my patterns of wanting to go back and view the world in a particular way. Does it work? Not so much.
Yeah, that's
so
the issue.
There's no point in doing that.
Yeah.
There are certain familiar stories. You know, we touched on one a little while ago. It's a sort of familiar story, and do I want to make my choices based on that? There's an interesting thing. You know, this for me is a resonance issue. We've talked on this show a lot about beliefs and thoughts and choices, and those are all raw materials of reality and of creativity and creation. And they are all energies. They're all resonances. So, yeah, there are certain patterns that I have of, back to the pie metaphor. And I don't have to unhook any of them. And I go there. And at the same time, I can add, if I add to my anxiety, to my fear, to my lack of trust, if I add just the tiniest drop of willingness, the tiniest drop of compassion, the tiniest drop of, do I really know that to be true? I don't have to annihilate, just the tiniest drop. The whole frequency of it changes. The whole standing wave of that energy collapses into its own chaos.
Yeah.
So I don't have to fix anything. You just have to add a tiny bit of humility that in the next moment it could all be different.
Yeah.
Tiny.
And
you know, I have been saying this sort of thing to myself for quite some time, and only just recently owning that I am operating that way. I am, and that my reality, my life, is absolutely a map of those kinds of choices. And when I look at it, I would really have to go into a lot of story pretzeling to turn my life into the pie.
Yeah, you can't do it.
You know,
It's not.
there's
so look,
still some of that operating, and
no, I get it.
more and more.
You can't put the toothpaste back in the tube.
No.
It's out. It's done. But that it still comes up. That there's still this moment when when I go there. And I went,
and you love it.
I went there.
That's
the first priority.
The only thing
Prime
left.
directive. Love it. Love it.
You know, and I've heard the prime directive. I like that language. I've heard that forever, and I can remember when it was a joke, a skit on Saturday Night Live. There was this wonderful thing where they had this panel on every problem they had. Somebody just said, "Just love it," and I was as dubious of love and cynical of love as that sketch. And there comes a point in our maturity, certainly in my own maturity as a man, and my own awareness, my own consciousness, when I have more understanding of what love is. It's not always pretty, and it's not always starry-eyed, and it has very little to do with the adolescent ideas and projections that I have about love and romance, and it's a part of it. And I'm at a point now. Listen, I turned 60 the first recently, yeah, very recently, and for the first time in my life, I do feel a mastery of love and of being loved. I feel loved and loving, and so to take all these pieces that and all of these habits and love them and love them and love them and love them, that has more meaning to me now than it ever did before. It's still mysterious as can be. You said something wonderful this morning about some formula that you had about what reality is. And I thought, well, that's really good. And to that I would add that the whole thing is held in the biggest loving mystery that is so beyond any ability for me to even relate to, except that I'm beginning to feel the love.
So the word we've used before with this, I have a sense of what you're talking about, though I couldn't repeat it because I don't remember exactly what I said, but I know what you're talking about. The word is "and." So whenever I have one of those little moments of clarity, like, oh, I got it, or even just a moment of great languaging, because I'm a language words guy. I love the words. Let's put the words together. That sounds fantastic. Okay, let's call it that. We put an "and" on the other side of it. And
I put really?
Well, but the "and" allows for it to be true.
Yeah.
And then "and."
But I want to have it in a perspective. When I was an infant, sucking my toe, and that was the most wondrous thing in the world. And that's true. But now, You put away.
Toe sucking is fantastic. You do enough yoga with.
I haven't done enough yoga.
Friend Scott, and you'd be.
I haven't done
right
quite
there.
enough yoga. But where I am now, the toe sucking, between that and here, it's more than "and."
Yeah.
"And" just feels incremental. I want to affirm to myself a sense of the big picture. Even though I have no idea what the big picture is, I have a pretty good idea of what the smaller picture is.
That's it.
And just feels like, crusts. I really want to foster a sense of, I go out at night on my deck and I look out into that, I live in a dark space and there's nothing. And some of those stars, some of that light is coming from X light years, and some of it is coming from triple X light years, and some of it is coming from triple X light years, and it's all hitting me right now. And it's beyond my my ability, my cognition to handle that, but somewhere in my heart I can feel the poetry of it, and that's bigger than an and.
Big time. Well, and it's bigger than the desire to control and manipulate
Yeah.
and whatever. And even figure it out on some level. Because, look, we get seduced. I mean, you're talking about me being seduced into something which is trying to figure it out or name it or call it or something like this around reality, which is okay. But that on the other side of that, and this is where I was saying but we won't use that word. We'll say on the other side of that, there's a bigger possibility.
I love that.
Yeah.
On the other side of that already feels.
Yeah. Yeah, because it's what I can see today, and tomorrow I might see more, right? Or in the next moment. Forget tomorrow.
And I may even be seeing with the eyes of my heart.
Right.
I may be seeing with the ears of my heart. I mean, it all starts to get sliced and diced.
It does. It does. So we...
Scott Blum we had on.
It was fun.
It was really fun.
Yeah. And I love the Daily Ohm. So great. And that he... something arrived in his consciousness, and he went, oh.
And we did that too. 3 years ago, we decided, well, let's do a show.
Yeah.
Those shows were a little funky in the beginning.
Well, that's part of the growing experience.
That's
you
right.
know? Though I've looked at some of them recently and really found that they were fun. Yeah. I love Petting the Horse. I don't know if you ever revisit that one, but it's great.
That was a good one.
Yeah, there's a bunch of them early on that were fun. You know, even the wanderings to get to here, we were working pretty hard to have it pretty locked down at one time as a theorem. 5 steps to consciousness, 7 steps to,
7 steps to the 5 steps. But wait, there's more.
So that we're not doing that as much is okay. It makes total sense that we're not as tied to that stuff, but that there's always going to be.
Well, this is a practice, isn't it?
It is.
I mean, folks, our listeners, you may or may not have realized that this is for us a practice. It's a moving meditation. There's so much power in the speaking that to explore these topics as deeply as we are able to, week after week after week, 250, 300 hours worth of it at this point, with these amazing guests.
Yeah.
All of whom
are willing to go off trail with us.
Yes, and we have this amazing ability to set the course.
Yeah.
We set the course. So it's really a mirroring of where we're interested in exploring. So we've created for ourselves this retreat, this monastery. We come in here and it becomes very much a sacred space, and we go very deep, and it works me all week.
A word came to mind. I don't think it's the right word, but it's kind of a think tank. But think tank has a connotation that's not what I'm trying to say.
Heart tank.
Heart tank. But I don't know if that's even it, because it's a think heart. It's we've called it a kitchen table conversation about consciousness. We've called it a reality show about reality. That it's a laboratory. But it's also very much like a sandbox. We've called it that too. It's a big sandbox. Let's come play in this sandbox.
I've heard people refer to it as a radio satsang.
Yeah.
I've heard.
Yeah.
I don't know what it is.
I love that.
It's very dreamy.
It is very dreamy, and it's fun because that's a good frequency. That helps move it from, again, the control, small world, small story, pie, one pie, got to get it right, to something that could, in a moment, burst into a whole thread of possibility that takes us all out of whatever's been done before, right? Which we're pretty committed to. We're pretty committed to playing at our own edge with the faith, the trust, similar to what Scott was talking about, that something will emerge and be born out of that has value in the world, that's meaningful. And one of the big...
something will always emerge.
Right.
Something will always emerge. Will it emerge as a version of the past,
right,
with barely new paint, not even disguised anymore? Or will it emerge as something it's always from the future anyway. Will it emerge from some future sense of what is possible and the frequencies that I am, resonances that I am holding of anticipation, enthusiasm, of compassion and love. I'm putting that out. Will it emerge from that in ways that will be a wonder to discover and explore? What often can happen is we take our past experiences and we harbor them so tightly, and we envision them, and we expect this is too good to be true, and this can't possibly happen, or this terrible thing's gonna. We take these things and we cast them out as future stories, and we live into them, and then we are not so surprised.
Yeah,
we double down on the cynicism.
Yeah. So the what Scott referred to as a kind of destiny that's been pulling him along, that's been revealing itself in moments, and go, oh, this is what I'm meant to be doing. And that
that's a destiny self-chosen,
right.
I think.
Right. Well, versus a fate, which is the belief that there's something that is predetermined. It's an unfolding that, it's like an offer. It's I said the offer word. But it's like something that...
We should get a pot.
Well, but I don't do it that often. You notice I haven't been doing it.
I know, we'd be broke right now. We wouldn't be able to cover lunch.
I'm off my rigid language. For listeners who don't know, I was using the word offer way too much. So we had to go, well, is that the right word? So I'm playing with other words. But that there's something that's mine to discover and uncover and reveal and express in the world is an orientation that I find very helpful. And that I don't know what it is, but I can tell you some of the qualities, because those are always the moments when I feel the most fulfilled. And my own personal fulfillment is the game. Not as self-gratifying, but just, again, what am I here to give and offer in the world? What Scott said. That each of us has
share the qualities.
For me, fun, that it's creative, that it's collaborative. I really love playing with other people. Huge dose of love. That there's something also very generous that gets offered out from what I create, where other people get something from it. It's like I want to please the audience, but it's so different than my earlier please the audience because then I'll be okay. It's please the audience so that that everyone's pleased, that quality of please, that's pleasure. There's pleasure in this. This is fun. I like it. That it's interesting. That it's engaged. That I'm engaged. That's all part of it. So. We come to a place where we can safely say goodbye because we were so distracted.
Well, we have a couple of things that we want to announce. First of all, we want to talk about a couple of things. One is Scott Blum's movie, Walk In, and that is available now through Hay House.
Your movie.
My movie, yes, Milton's Secret. This is a movie that I'm doing based on a book by Eckhart Tolle. Peter Fonda is in it. It's a really... wonderful, I think, family movie. And for those that want to learn a little bit more about Milton's Secret and hear from myself and from Eckhart Tolle talking about transformational entertainment and some other cool things, please look at our site at Indiegogo.com. Look for Milton's Secret.
And Cutting Edge Consciousness. The banner, of course, is up on our site as well.
So we have some very cool things to share with you about that.
And with that, we look forward to seeing you again soon, and keep tuning in to Cutting Edge Consciousness.
Thank you.